So Tony, let's change the conversation slightly. What is your take on this renewed interest in the Quad Alliance? And of course, you know, as you said earlier, the activities in the Indo-Pacific, and which is emerging as a new epicenter for economics and strategic gravity. The four countries that have got together or revived the Quad. What is your thought and views on that?
Well, I think it's absolutely critical for the long-term future of democracy, not just in our region, but globally, given the rapidly developing strategic competition between the United States and China. So it's critically important. Now, but the United States, Japan and Australia need to absolutely accept that India is not just a partner here, but almost a leader here. And there can't be any sense that we're using India. There's got to be an absolute understanding on the part of all members of the Quad that each of them has to be taken seriously. But given that the biggest shift required here is from India, that there's a level of understanding and appreciation towards India. I mean, we go back to the 50s, 60s, and even the 70s and 80s. India was not aligned with the United States. I mean, it was not, I suppose, antagonistic to the United States, but it was certainly not aligned with the United States. There was a long history under Nehru and others of non-alignment, in fact. Now, for India to depart even subtly from that, it's a big shift. And I think we need to appreciate, particularly in Australia and in the United States, we need to appreciate just what a big shift this is and be extremely grateful for it.
Yeah. Look, that makes a lot of sense in that if you look at the current government and what they've done since 2014.
I mean, it was interesting when I was in India in 2019 and I spoke at one of your leading foundations. The deputy director of this particular foundation was a former Indian naval officer who came up and said to me afterwards, you know, your ships and planes used to spend a lot of time surveilling us as recently as the 1990s because you didn't trust us. And I had to, as it were, apologise for the fact that we may have been a little big for our boots in those days. But India has been big enough to appreciate the times change, and we certainly must be.
Absolutely, yeah. And look, I think geopolitically, with the advent of what's happening globally, India is increasingly becoming a leader in many different areas. It's taken on the mantle of that as well. And if you look at the current Minister for Foreign Affairs, he was a diplomat. And because of his, you know, huge knowledge and experience in diplomacy and traveling to various countries, he was appointed as the Minister for Foreign Affairs. Now, it's a very rare thing to happen in a country like India, but you can see the forward-thinking sort of mentality about what the government is thinking. And now, you know, the foreign direction or India's foreign policy is open. And everyone knows what they want to do and what they want to achieve. So I think you're right. We need to accept India for what it is. And where
I mean, India will be a leader, not a follower.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a passive partner anywhere. It's going to be a very active partner with anyone who engages with it.
I agree. So back to the Australia-India relationships. What do you think, what do you see the obstacles in this relationship and what are your ambitions for the Australia-India ties?
Well, I'd rather not focus on the obstacles. I'd rather just focus on the opportunities. Now, I'm very conscious of the fact that one of the reasons why the Australia-China relationship blossomed so extraordinarily from the 80s through until recently has been because people like Bob Hawke and Paul Keating in their post-prime ministerial lives spent a lot of time cultivating that relationship. So there wasn't just the official enthusiasm, there was a lot of unofficial, almost community enthusiasm. Now, I am more than happy to devote a large slab of whatever time I've got left as an active citizen to trying to promote this relationship, because I think it is absolutely critical, not just for our two countries, but for the wider world.
Look, I feel the same, and a lot of people feel the same. What you have achieved when you were Prime Minister with the introduction of the CECA, Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement, and I know that your Trade Minister was sent to India at least 5 times, 6 times in 1 year to try to complete that. Your relationship with PM Modi on a personal basis is warm and it's welcoming.
Yep.
And your passion and understanding for India, particularly at the grassroots, when you went to Bihar, but on a regular basis, keeping an eye on what's happening in India is essential, because then you understand how it flows to Delhi. So, you know, I think that's a wonderful opportunity, and it would be remiss of the current government to not take up your offer. The Australian government released the India Economic Strategy to 2035, which highlights, 10 sectors and 10 states. Earlier this year, the Indian government reciprocated with the Australia Economic Strategy. Both offer elaborate roadmaps on opportunities that exist for both countries. How can both countries refine or redefine these ties? What will you want both countries to do differently from here on in?
Well, the first point to make, Dippin, is that they're both very sophisticated documents that have benefited from enormous research and analysis. The recently released Indian paper is a particularly impressive piece of work, which has gone into the circumstances here in Australia in great depth. So look, a lot of thinking is going on. There is an abundance of goodwill on both sides, and I think it's now just a question of people being prepared to keep the dialogue going, to knock on doors, and if one door doesn't open, keep knocking until doors do. It's now just going to take the sort of effort, sort of reciprocal effort that has opened doors in the past with other countries between Australia and India. And I'm certainly prepared to do everything I can. And the impression I have, particularly given changing circumstances elsewhere in the region, is that so many other people are prepared to keep putting in a much bigger effort because our horizons have been lifted and shifted in a way that we haven't seen before.
We talked about the free trade agreement, something that was initiated in your government, and you were hopeful that both countries can work together in this. But do you think that a free trade agreement would, in this current environment, encompass everything, or do we look at specific industry sectors and then slowly build on each?
Look, I was a little disappointed that after I left office, the momentum for a free trade deal seemed to slacken off for a while, but that's just water under the bridge now. The important thing is that there is renewed official enthusiasm on both sides. And let's do what we can as soon as we can. One of the thoughts I had was maybe taking the agreement that was all but concluded, involving quite a large number of countries. Now, for reasons which I understand, India decided late in the day not to get involved in the RCEP, and I'm more than happy to completely abandon the, if you like, any RCEP connotation, so to speak, but the work that was done for that may well be readily transferable to a bilateral between Australia and India. The other possibility is to take, as you say, a few key sectors and see if there can't be a highly reciprocal arrangement in these key sectors. If at the same time there could be a bit of high-profile Australian investment into India, I think that would certainly help.
Certainly help, yeah. We often talk about at NGG how when we're connecting the two countries, how we look at Australia's strengths fitting India's aspirations. And both of those reports highlight that quite extensively, as you said, in a detailed manner. So there is room not to have an all-encompassing free trade, but there are specifics that the countries have spoken about.
Yeah, look, resources, agriculture, infrastructure, I think Australia has a lot to offer. Healthcare, obviously IT, pharmaceuticals. India has a lot to offer. So I think there's immense scope. It's just a question of getting cracking.
Where do you see Australia-India ties in the next 5 years?
I think there's only one way, and that's up. I think the only question is, will the ties grow exponentially, or will they grow arithmetically? And obviously, I'd like to see things happen exponentially.
Yeah. Any final last words?
Dippin, it's an honour and a pleasure to speak, and I look forward to many further such talks.
I understand you've been invited to the Raisina Dialogue. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I'm looking forward to being there, subject, of course, to the vagaries of this pandemic period, but I'm certainly looking forward to being there, and I'm sure one way or another there'll be a lot of important things said and done.
Absolutely. Tony, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Tippin.
Thank you.